everyone, welcome to Two Car Pros. My name is Ryan, and today we're going to be continuing our small block Chevy build with part 5, timing set and oiling system. So I'm making this guide as easy as possible to help as many people as possible. I want you at home to be able to take a junkyard small block Chevy and build it into something that you can use on the street or the strip. So I'm going over every single nut and bolt. This is a very in-depth guide. The whole playlist is located down below in the description, so if you've missed any of the previous parts, you can catch them there. And you can be up to speed on how we're turning a junkyard block right up into a total hot rod engine. Before we go any further, let's thank our amazing sponsor, Summit Racing. Summit Racing has built 5 engines with us now. They're an incredible sponsor. I've been using them for decades before they were my sponsor. They have incredible selection, amazing returns, and probably the most fantastic customer support I've ever encountered. So make sure you get all your speed parts from summitracing.com. The engine in question is a Gen 1 small block Chevy. This is applicable to every small block Chevy that's typically referred to like that, and any displacement, because the only thing that would change on displacement is the bore and the stroke. Ours happens to be an original 350 block that has been stroked to a 383 stroker. We also have a 2-piece rear main seal, and that will change which oil pan you get. So if you have 1-piece rear main seal, you need to get the oil pan and correct gasket for that. So that's kind of basically the only little difference you're going to get. And if you have a stroker engine like we do, you need a stroker clearance pan, or else the crankshaft is just going to bonk right into the bottom of the oil pan and you're going to be really frustrated. So like I said, today's kind of a light day, but it's really important to get the details correct so your cam is timed correctly to your crankshaft and your oil pump is obviously correctly installed there as well, because if you don't have your oil pump correctly installed, you're not going to have any oil pressure. So it's important to pay attention and get the details just right. With all that out of the way, let's jump in. So the next thing we need to do is put in these oil galley plugs. They use this 3/8 pipe fitting that you can get them at pretty much any hardware store, but I've left them a link down below in the description just for you. And you don't need sealer. A lot of people will tell me that they will put sealer on these, pipe tape or some sort of goo. Here's my rationale on that. If it's gonna leak, it's gonna leak by just a teeny tiny bit, really a few drops. And guess where this cavity goes? Right into the oil pan, so it's not like it's external or anything. So that's my rationale. If you have a different one, please leave it down below. And if you feel like you need to use some sort of pipe tape, go ahead. I'm not going to stop you. And then I'm just going to snug these down, maybe like wrist tight. They don't need to be like super Omega Hulk tight. Just like that's fine. If I find a torque spec, I will leave it on screen. Otherwise, just wrist tight is pretty good. And that is awesome. So now we can worry about putting our timing set on. This is made by Summit Racing in the United States. It's a performance timing set, which means it has a bunch of different adjustability, and it's a double roller. There is our part number, and the link is located down below in the description for your convenience. Check that out. Wow, that's really nice. So you can see that it actually has 2 sets of chains. There's 1 chain and 2 chain. That just means it's a lot stronger than a conventional 1 chain setup. It's more of a high performance application. Also, it has different ways to put the bottom cog on. That is something that you can, advance the cam timing or retard the cam timing. I just leave it straight up how the manufacturer kind of intended it, in my opinion. I've always had really good luck just lining the dots up and hitting go. Also, this has a thrust bearing on it. That's pretty cool. But that needs to be lubricated before we put it on. I'm not going to bother taking it off because it looks like there's a little clip that holds it on, and I don't want all the bearing needles to fall out. So I'm probably just going to put the whole thing, except for the bottom cog, in a bath of oil. What we're going to do with this guy is take it out of the timing set, and I'm going to go put it in my little toaster oven and get this piece up to about 200 degrees Fahrenheit. And of course, be very careful, use an oven mitt when handling it very, very hot, because what that's going to do is make this cog just a little bit bigger than usual, and it's going to be able to slip on the end of the crankshaft really easy that way. Alternatively, if you live somewhere hot and it's a hot day, you could just leave it outside on the sidewalk and wait for it to heat up that way. And trust me, it will. With our lower cog in our toaster oven, I can go ahead and put our big cog and its chain in our oil bath. And we want that to be nice and bathed with oil, especially like this. And I don't want the bearing to be disturbed or anything. So I'm just going to see, once you put it in there, you can see all the bubbles coming out of that bearing. And you can even kind of manipulate it like this just to make sure everything gets a nice happy coat of oil, and our timing set will be off to a nice healthy start. So now you can see that my sprocket is really hot. I'm actually wearing my MIG welding gloves, and you might be able to see on there, right there is a 0, and that is where I'm going to put it on our crankshaft or the woodruff key goes. So it's on the 0 mark. I'm just going to set that back as far as I can, just kind of by hand, and then it'll kind of get to this point where it'll be a little bit on the stuck side. That's okay. What we can do is I'm going to use a 36mm socket and just place it on the sprocket and just tap on a lot. Look how easy that is. And there we go. And you'll notice I stopped because the back of the sprocket was flush against the step on the crankshaft. You can't hammer it back any further than that, so don't try. And then you don't want to hammer it like with the strength of Zeus or something, because you can actually affect the thrust bearing by doing that. That's why we heated this up to expand it, to make it as easy as possible to install in our crankshaft. So the next thing I want to talk about is this 0 and this R2 and A2. This stands for retarding, this stands for advancing. Basically, if you have like a jet boat that is going to be running super high RPM the entire time, you want the power to come in later, so you would retard the camshaft timing. Now, if you had like a tractor or a big stump pulling truck or something, you would advance the camshaft timing. That would enable the power to come in at lower RPM. Now, between you and me, I always put mine at 0. That way I get the best of both worlds. So that way I can have something that is pretty good on the low end and pretty good on the high end. So I always recommend just putting on the 0, setting it, and forgetting it. Alrighty, so now that our sprocket is installed, we need to put our timing set on. In order to do that, we need this 0 right here to be pointing straight up and down on the engine, and our woodruff key 0 to be pointed straight at number 1, kind of at this angle. So I have a bolt in the front of the crank snout, and that should enable me to rotate the engine over enough till this 0 is pointing straight up like that. And obviously we can adjust it a little bit here and there while we're putting the timing set on, but you kind of just want to be in the ballpark. So now that this is totally cool to the touch, it's actually cold, we can put the rest of our timing set on. So I can extract the big gear from the oil, as well as the chain. And what you want to do is face it the correct way so the bearing faces to the block, and then you hang the chain on the big one like that. Make sure it's nice and down in its home. And as you are going to hang it, turn it around and look for like a ping or a dot. There it is. There is our ping we are looking for, and that ping is going to line up with our 0 that we pointed straight up earlier. And don't worry, it will either be right on the money or it'll be off by a whole bunch. So don't be too concerned about the resolution of the timing set. So it looks like we need to rotate our camshaft a little bit to get that to fit on. And don't worry if you don't get it right the first time. You can always just take it right back off. It's all right. So I need to rotate the cam a little more. So I'm just going to at least start one so my sprocket doesn't just wander off on me. There we go. So then I'm going to take some red Loctite and put it on all 3 bolts. I'm just using one to kind of hold it right this moment, because this is going to be whizzing around pretty darn good. And then obviously have your bolts be nice and clean and dry, because oil will negate the Loctite, doing kind of the opposite of what you want. Then we can take a 1/2" drive socket and just kind of set it down a little bit. Don't go too crazy on one bolt at a time. Just kind of break it up as much as you can. A couple turns here, a couple turns there, and then move on to the next bolt, as we want it to sit down nice and even on the front of our camshaft. And then our torque spec for these bolts is 20 foot-pounds, which isn't a whole heck of a lot between you and me, but that's why we have Loctite on there. So after your timing set is installed, this is what I'm referring to when the marks are called quote-unquote straight up, because this 0 and this ping or dot are pointing directly at each other. That's how you know that the crankshaft and the camshaft are timed correctly to each other in relative timing. So next we're going to put on our timing cover. But before that goes on, go ahead and clean this surface off with some solvent or carb spray or something like that, and grab the gasket and apply adhesive to the gasket itself, I just have spray adhesive, and you can place it on the dowels, kind of handily hold onto it for you, just like that. This is contact adhesive, so you can kind of lift it up a little bit, get the air behind it, mush it back down. And then we're going to put our new timing cover on and work kind of quickly because the adhesive is setting. And just laying it up on the dowels. The link down below in the description to this awesome new timing cover made by Summit Racing and sent over by them. And we can just kind of put some bolts in, just get them started. Because the old ones tend to be a little flimsy. And this new one even has a seal pre-installed, which saves me some time. That's nice. So I'm just going to set them down by hand for right this moment. And then just go around replacing the bolts like you normally would. Making sure you don't disturb the gasket, making sure everything is totally happy. Okay, so now it's time to tighten down our timing cover. So basically you just kind of want to go across. Whenever you tighten a bolt down, I'm just going to do wrist tight, you just go to the other side and just kind of jump around so the thing will sit down nice and flush on the front of our block. And this doesn't really have, you gotta remember this is an aftermarket product, so it doesn't have like an official torque spec. You can use the GM one if you want, but you have a chance of snapping off these aftermarket fasteners. So just keep going around, just keep going across and across and across and all the way around until it's set all the way down. And again, I wouldn't really go anything beyond wrist tight, probably like 15 foot-pounds. It's not very tight. Just go around a few times to make sure you got everything and it is sat down nice and even, just like that. So next, let's focus on our oiling system for our small block Chevy. This is our new oil pump made by Summit Racing, sent over by them, and the link is down below in the description. Made in the USA. This is a really nice pump, and you can see it's brand new. It also comes with a pickup. I think this might be sold separately, but check this out. They've finally figured out to put bolt holes on it. So now, when you put it on the pump itself, you actually get to bolt it to the pump. In the olden days, you would put the pickup in the pump like this and then weld it together. So if you don't have bolt holes on your pickup, I would definitely weld it because obviously these motors like to shake a lot like this and the pickup can just work its way out and fall off. You could probably guess what happens after that. Not good things. Also comes with a gasket, and then I recommend getting a new oil pump drive shaft that comes down to the distributor, and I have a link for that as well. This one's really neat too, also made by Summit Racing because it has a metal sleeve for its couple device instead of a plastic one. Back in the old days, they would come with a plastic one like this. Throw these in the trash. You really want metal for obvious reasons, more robust. This could just break off technically and have it, because imagine the plastic sheath breaks off. This could just get out of its home here on the pump, and now you don't got no oil pressure. And again, you can probably guess what happens. And then finally with our oil system is this adapter. This converts old school canister style oil filters to the new type, the screw-on type we all know and love, and that's a really nice part. Comes with brand new ARP fasteners, and I definitely recommend this part, and all the links are located down below in the description. So let's jump into our oil system. So the next thing we can do is just place our copper gasket just like that on those dowels. Make sure it's nice and seated down. We can grab our pump. So before we get ahead of ourselves, let's put our oil pump drive rod down in this hole right here, because we can't put it in after we put our pump in, and it'll just hang out right there for us. And then we can put our oil pump on. It only goes on the one way, just like this. And if it's not sitting down all the way, maybe try rotating your push rod around a little bit, but this seems fine. Then this is a really special bolt. It's a 7/16 bolt, and 3/8 might kind of go in there, and you might think it's okay, but it'll actually leak like crazy. And you notice I put Loctite on it too. This is a really special bolt, and I would definitely recommend holding onto it from either your previous build like we did. This is an old school bolt, or you can just grab a new one from something like ARP, and I'll leave a link down below in the description. But if you do use ARP or a different fastener manufacturer, you will have a different torque specification, so that's something to kind of keep in mind as well. So now I have the bolt down to touch. I also added a washer because it seemed like it was going a little bit too far into the cap. And our torque spec today is 70 foot-pounds. Again, if you're using a different fastener manufacturer, yours might be different, but always use Loctite. There we go. And it's a 5/8 bolt on a stock application. If you have aftermarket, it might be a little bit different. So on my particular oil pump, I'm going to take a 10mm socket, and we're going to remove just these two bolts here. because we need to install our pickup, and it has those really neat bolt holes on it. Alternatively, you would just weld the pickup onto the pump, like I said earlier. But this is nice because, you know, not a lot of people have a welder. That's okay. So we can grab our pickup, place it in our oil pump itself, and just kind of wiggle it to sort of just get it started so it doesn't just fall off. So what I'm gonna do is just grab a plastic hammer, and we're just gonna start tapping it in just to kind of get it started so it doesn't just fall off. So what we're gonna do is focus on this barb right here. It's gonna help us send this home into the oil pump. So what we're gonna do is grab a crescent wrench and put it just in front of it towards us and tighten this down as much as you can. And then I'm gonna grab a hammer and I'm gonna try to aim for right here. This is gonna be our key. Okay, so I sent the pickup home into the pump itself. You'll know you're done when the barb is pretty much flush against the oil pump housing, but you don't want to overshoot the holes here on the pickup bracket either. Also, I recommend freezing this before you get started. I actually ended up taking it back off, freezing it for about an hour or two, and then going back on it made it a lot easier. So just a little pro tip between me and you. Now we can put our other bolts back in. Then we can replace our bolts that we removed earlier, making sure everything lines up and everything's happy. And I noticed the bolts on the back also loosened just a hair when I took the bolts out, so my recommendation is just snug them all back down in an X pattern and just wrist tight. You don't need to overthink it or anything. Just like that, and our pump and pickup are installed. So now let's put our oil filter adapter. This is going to convert this old style engine over to a new style of oil filter. And it doesn't matter which way you put it on, it can go that way or the other way. And there is no gasket. In fact, the instructions it came with tell me not to use one, probably because it will just loosen on up. And our torque spec for these is going to be 15 on the torque spec. If you don't have a torque wrench, that's totally fine. Just snug. Honestly, this housing's made of pretty thin metal, and you could crack it really easy. There you go. That's all I'm going to give it. So what we're going to do now is focus on putting our oil pan on. Before we do that, we need to put the gasket on. Before we do that, we need to put some insurance in our back pocket. And the way we're going to do that is with this Permatex Ultra Black gasket maker. And you see this giant cavity right here? Just blurp that up. Fill it up just like that. And then come over the top, lay a bead in this groove right here. Doesn't need to be an enormous bead, just something. And then on the other side, replicate what you did here on this side. What that's going to do is basically give us some cheap insurance on oil leakage. Yeah, it looks pretty good. And then we can do the same thing for the back here. Just kind of fill this area up with black RTV. Maybe a little more. All right. And then we're just going to fill a nice bead right here all the way across this channel, and then do the same thing on the far side as we did on the side you guys can see. And there we go. Now we can lay our gasket on top, put our pan on top of that, and put our bolts in. So then we can put our Summit Racing gasket they sent over on, just making sure that the thicker part actually goes to the front. It's kind of funny. And this gasket's really cool because it accommodates both sides of the dip tube, sometimes on the driver, sometimes on the passenger, and just gingerly set it in its home, making sure it goes into that groove, and just kind of massage it until it goes into its home and all the bolt holes line up. There we go. It's looking pretty good. Just make sure that all the bolt holes are lining up. If they're not, maybe you have to readjust your gasket a little bit. And then we can put our oil pan on. If you're running a stroker kit, make sure you get one that is stroker clearance like this one is. It's made by Summit Racing, and the link is located down below in the description. Also, notice that the dip tube is on the passenger side. My last engine was on the driver's side, so you want to pay attention to that. They make the same things, just kind of flipped. So what we can do is gingerly lower it down, making sure our pickup kind of goes into its home where it wants to be. And then you can kind of look down and line up our bolt holes with our oil pan, kind of like that. And you can adjust a little bit later, so don't be too chagrined if you don't get it right on the money the first drop. Yeah, that's looking really good. So go ahead and grab these bolts out of our bolt kit. I have linked it down below in the description. They have oil pan written on them, and they're the little bit bigger bolt. So we're just going to start those. I'm not going to tighten these down. I'm just going to get them started because that'll kind of help locate the pan on the block. And then do the same for the rears. So with all of our bolts placed in, we got the bigger bolts on the front and the rear here, right there. What we're gonna do is kind of start in the middle with the 7/16 headed bolts, and we're just gonna do a spiral until it goes all the way out. So you can start right in the middle. This is a 7/16 bolt. And just do, I don't know, maybe one arm tight. And go to the other side. And then do next door on the other side, whichever side the spiral you want to do is. Sorry, I don't have a torque spec for you. It's all aftermarket stuff, so I don't typically do on things like this. Just use your better judgment, or you can look up the stock Chevy one, but if you're really questioning it, just look up the stock Chevy spec. I'll even put it on screen. And then you just kind of go over here, and you just work in a spiral all the way around. And I'm sure you don't want to watch me tighten every single bolt, so just keep going in a bigger and bigger circle all the way around. Do that at least 3 times, because as the gasket is being compressed, it's going to loosen. So just double check all the bolts at least 3 times. So if you're truly worried about the pickup clearance to the bottom of the pan, typically they're okay. You could use some Play-Doh and put it down there and bolt the pan down, take it back off and measure your squish and all that. Or you can have one of these, which is just a borescope camera, and look inside of the pan itself and just physically look at it. Check that out. We're about maybe a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch off the bottom of the pan. A little tricky to see because of the reflection, but look, there's plenty of opportunity for oil to get up in there. It is not going to starve at all. So this pickup is right on the money. So now we're ready to put on our oil filter, and I've already filled it to the very tippy top with engine oil and lubricated our seal just like you would do on a normal oil change. And this should just go right on our adapter, so that way you have a nice spin-on oil filter straight from Summit Racing, and of course the link is located down below in the description. So that is how to put on your timing set and oil system for a small block Chevy. It's really important to get those crucial details down. Now we don't ever have to turn the engine back over. We can put it in its normal plumb position and we'll never have to flip it back over on its head. So that's really exciting. This engine build is basically on the back stretch. Let's go ahead and thank our incredible sponsor, Summit Racing. Without them, this build would not be happening. So again, make sure you get all your speed parts from summitracing.com. Thank you so very much for watching. If you found this video helpful or interesting at all, please consider subscribing or becoming a member down below. You can also like the video. It really helps my channel out and helps my videos come to you more frequently. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.